Hi, everybody. Jack Russell, president of OneZone. Welcome to our podcast we do each and every month. Today, my guest, Representative Danny Lopez. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing great, Jack. How are you?
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. We appreciate it. We've got a lot to talk about when it comes to the State House, kind of where we're at. And we're in this unique period right now where session has ended, but somehow it feels like session's always going on.
Sure. For sure. It sure does.
But I want to talk about first you and your background. I think people would really enjoy getting to know your background because you've spent a lot of your time as well at the State House.
Yeah.
And you've helped run some unique when it comes to campaigning as well. I think I always think of Governor Holcomb's 100 and some day campaign.
100-day campaign.
100-day campaign. I think that's always fascinating. But let's talk a little bit about your background when it comes to the State House and how you got into the State House first, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Actually, it was Eric Holcomb.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So my wife and I, as you know, my wife and I are originally from Miami, not from Indiana. We've been here for now almost 20 years, unbelievably.
Yeah.
But we moved here in 2008, and shortly after moving here, I met Eric at the time.
Yeah.
I got connected to him through somebody in the governor's office in Florida. My business partner, and I had done the gubernatorial in 2006 in Florida, and had helped with the transition and other things. And so I got connected up. I forget how, but ended up reaching out to him. And at that time, he liked to have folks come to Ralph's Great Divide downtown.
Oh yeah.
And we'd have some peas and carrots and other stuff. And so we sat down and had a great conversation. My wife and I were living in Bloomington at the time. Sophia was doing her doctorate at IU. And he kept saying, well, what are you doing in Bloomington? You should come up and come work for Mitch and come up to Central Indiana. And after some cajoling, I finally did. And so I was commuting back and forth for a little while, but came up to work for the administration, had some great experiences, I was deputy commissioner at civil rights, which gave me a really broad understanding of civil rights law that I didn't have before, and got into some interesting issues at the state level, and made the transit, served out the term with Mitch, and then made the transition, was 1 year in the office with Governor Pence. And at that time, Eric was essentially Indiana chief of staff for Dan Coates, and brought me to be Dan's state director. So I did that for 3 years, working alongside him. He had left to the Senate race, if you remember, and stayed. Right. Yeah. And then in 2006, he came back as 2016, he came back as lieutenant governor. Unexpectedly, and I came back as his chief of staff, and so we worked together really intimately since then. So he and I was his chief, and then I staffed transition. We obviously the 100-day campaign, which really was I think what was an interesting view of that campaign, because with Governor Pence on the national campaign trail,
right,
and then Lieutenant Governor Holcomb at that time running for the top of the ticket and running for governor. There was a lot of people didn't really want to make a ton of decisions without our input. We were involved in all these things, and so these things that really the lieutenant governor and the lieutenant governor's chief of staff are rarely involved with, things like work stoppages on I-69 or lead in the soil in East Chicago, things that generally are handled by 206,
right,
and don't really fall to the lieutenant governor. I was thrown into, and so we were talking about Medicaid eligibility. We were transitioning to a new Medicaid eligibility system. I didn't really have a ton of experience with this, and was sort of learning on the fly and drinking from a fire hose, as they say. And while the campaign was going on, and so it was a wonderful experience. But then obviously we had not been doing transition like some of the other gubernatorial campaigns had a couple of months of transition before actually getting elected and winning. We started transition essentially the day after the election. And so this intensive process of assessing the agencies and interviewing agency heads and determining who we were going to keep and where we were going to make transitions was just incredible. And then, of course, you go into a budget year. Yeah. You're already sort of behind. Thank God that we had Earl Good as chief of staff, who had been there, has done as much for Central Indiana, really for Indiana, as probably anybody short of Jim Morris over the last 40 years in the public and the private sector, but understood how the process worked and could keep the plane flying stable as we got our legs under us. But once we did, we had a fantastic team, and I served out for about 3 years in the administration before transitioning out, and then obviously, as with the Pacers, so Pacer Sports and Entertainment. So it's been It's been an incredible ride. I mean, it's
That's
been
awesome.
wonderful 20 years, and I've seen a lot of things. It's been a really cool experience.
That's awesome. Well, then, of course, a couple years ago, decided to
Yeah.
run for state office. So you are, obviously in your first term,
Yeah.
running for your second term. Obviously you worked in state government a lot. Was there anything that surprised you when you got into being a state representative from any standpoint? I would imagine
Yeah.
some people don't have the knowledge and background that you have walking into it.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if there was anything that kind of surprised you at all.
Yeah, I get that question a lot.
I'm sure
Obviously.
you do.
Yeah, here's the thing that I didn't anticipate, because I think it's, and I don't know if it was a like pre-COVID, post-COVID type thing, or just the environment that we're in.
Yeah.
It didn't feel politics, at least for me. Others might have a different opinion, but politics, at least for me, pre coming back to the state house in this capacity, didn't feel quite as I don't know if personal is the right word.
Yeah.
But it felt like there was a sort of a separation between one's political views and your sort of political life, and then your normal life and your work life and all these kinds of things. And it feels like that is all one now. There's really no separation. And so that makes it difficult for a part-time legislature, for a citizen legislature.
Right.
That makes it really difficult, because if, the folks that you generally want running and serving in these political offices are people who have a lot of experience, are thoughtful, are, people who hold essentially real jobs, have real positions in real companies or real organizations, and they're relied upon. They've got responsibilities. Well, if there's no separation between the votes that you take in the state house or the political positions that you take on a campaign and the work that you do in daily life, that becomes a really difficult thing for candidates. And I fear what's happening is that it's harder and harder. It's already more difficult, but it's harder and harder to encourage good people to get involved in the process, throw their name in the hat, and because it's just become, and I don't know if that's the social media, I don't know if it's just the nature of where we are, the climate, and it'll normalize at some point. But that was a change.
dangerous. Yeah.
Outside of that, I as you said, I was clear-eyed when I ran. I knew what I was getting into. I felt like I had a unique set of experiences and skill set that could make me effective for our community on day one.
Yep.
And I think that's been the case. I walked into Ways and Means, thanks to the speaker and for appointing me to Ways and Means, but it puts you sort of in the middle of everything that's going on, particularly in a budget year, particularly with some of the issues I know we're going to talk about: taxation, local taxation, Senate Bill 1, those types of things. So I've had a seat at the table, and had I felt like it was going to be a long acclimation process, I don't think I would have done it. I think I would have waited and maybe gained a little experience, but I felt like I could be effective on day one.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about, so you've gone through, your first year was a budget session.
Yeah.
Second year, non-budget session. I would imagine they're similar but different.
Yeah. They still, everyone's got its own little flavor, no doubt about it. And these were two really interesting years, for sure.
Yes. I said that kind of jokingly, but it is true. Carol Auslander is our lobbyist, and I ask her every year, does this feel different? And she's like, every year is different.
Yeah.
Every year, every session is different. Because I think the needs and wants change, or we're also looking at, hey, and I think this is I always say sometimes this is a good part of creating policy, is you want to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then we try to then fix the things and maybe, hey, we can need to tweak that. So I think sometimes people look at it and go, oh gosh, it's so different and it's stressful. No, I think it's just the process of creating good policy, in my opinion.
Yeah. And somebody had told me the other day, well, you pass these things and then obviously you have to come back and fix them because they're not well thought out or not baked. I mean, that happens, no doubt about it, but I don't think that's the norm. I mean, I think even when you need to come back and tweak, it's a product of, look, this was a good piece of legislation that was well thought out, had stakeholder engagement and buy-in, and then you pass it. And as you implement, you realize, well, we didn't think about that, or here's something we should have caught and we didn't. So then you come back and tweak it, and it's a feature, not a bug.
100%. And I think so. We look at this. We'll use this last legislative session. Was there anything, especially beyond Ways and Means? We looked at it from some more from OneZone perspective. Was how do we look at local control and maybe looking at things? Was there anything that you felt like we got across that was really, hey, if we were maybe one thing or two things that came out, you felt like, hey, we've done some really good things this session? Because I think a lot of times people are like, well, I mean, it's just from a perspective as like, there's too many bills or we're doing too many. Like, I really think that this session, while disagreement is always a good thing, and I think there's also opportunities. But I felt like there were some really good things that came out of this session, especially as we get ready to go into a budget session that I think will be unique. I think they're all unique, but I think this one will be unique. But let's talk about, what did you feel like really, really worked this session, and are really proud of, that maybe the folks that are watching should really know?
Well, I mean, I think the utility bill that Alina
that's the
carried
first one I was
was a big one. It was an important step forward. It wasn't. It was stuff that you can continue to build on. I think more has to be done. But Alina did a fantastic job carrying that bill and getting the people that needed to be in the room to have the right kinds of conversations. I mean, I think when you look at how it passed, that's a good indication that there was a lot of support. And a lot of work was done to get a lot of bipartisan energy behind it. So that was a fantastic first step. I think there were a lot of really good conversations around continuing to constrain Medicaid growth. I mean, this is going to be a piece of the pie, and no matter how you slice it. And I think we have to do it in a way that ensures that the most vulnerable have access to programs that they need. I mean, it's interesting because, when you think about the Medicaid space, it's actually, 36 programs or whatever, right? People call it Medicaid and we call it Medicaid, but it's a lot of different programs that do a lot of different things for a lot of people. And so ensuring that, yes, you're getting at waste, fraud, and abuse, and yes, you're tightening up who ought to be receiving these types of programs or be eligible for these types of programs. You've got to make sure that they're sustainable, and you've got to make sure that they're really well thought out as you take those steps. So we tackled a little bit of that. I carried one of the bills through the House, and we scaled it back because I went back to FSSA, to the agency, and essentially said, look, these are good discussion points, but they ought to be had when we've got a new budget forecast, we've got a new Medicaid forecast, and we're in a budget year next year. And so we had really robust conversations about them, and then sort of pulled those provisions back, which again is part of the process to air some of these things out. I think my default, as you know, Jack, is always going to be on the economic development side. I think Indiana's bread and butter, where we've been able to sort of begin to compete, not just regionally, but nationally and globally, for investment, has been because we've been aggressive and smart and strategic on the economic development front. And I think we tried to put some things in place to open up some buckets again, to relocate headquarters or make some of the investments. It was a nice investment with CERTA that the governor made a couple of weeks ago. I think it was huge investment. It was important, and I think those are the types of things that came out of the session because we freed up some dollars that could be invested in the life sciences or 100%, or public health, which are strengths for us from an industry standpoint.
Yeah. I think if there's really one good, and I don't know that always saying Hamilton County is a good example, because I'm not sure that that's always loved as being a good example, but for you that serves, we look at Carmel, Westfield, that type of area, but we look at the county as a whole. I mean, we have built ourselves on economic development.
Absolutely. And again, it's interesting because we've gone from, if you think about where we were 20 years ago, not being able to pay our bills, not being able to pave our roads, not being able to pay our schools, to where we are now, which, Indiana is in the conversation for some of the most significant economic development investments anywhere in the country. We're a magnet for this. We're one of the few states, we say this over and over again, that continues to grow population. States in the Midwest that continues to grow population. Every other state in the Midwest is hemorrhaging population, and some of them are coming here. But we're gaining population. It's places like Hamilton County that continue to grow, and the reason they continue to grow is because we have not only relocated headquarters and generated capex investment, but we've got amenities that people want. We've been able to build that on the backs of economic investment, and so we've got to keep our foot on the gas. I know there's been a lot of conversation over the last year and a half about transparency and the IEDC and other things. And certainly there are things on the transparency front that we can do better, that could be better conversations. Right. But the function of making these kinds of investments and being smart about putting incentives on the table to try to attract the right kinds of jobs at the right kinds of wages, we can't walk that back. That's our competitive advantage. And so, again, through session, we were able to have a lot of these conversations publicly in Ways and Means and other committees, and drive some of these, open up some of these buckets to some of the investments. And then, something that I worked for the last, probably 8 months on that I think does have important ramifications. It's a little nuanced, so a lot of people don't really understand the impact or necessarily what we did, but we completely restructured the governance structure of the Marion County courts.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about Marion County courts, it's now a quarter of all of the caseload in Indiana.
Wow.
It's, the most significant cases generally end up in Marion County Superior Court. So when you think of anytime the governor gets sued or anything like that, any of your bigger cases end up in Marion County. And of course, when you've got a situation where, 40% of every jail for all of our donut counties are Marion County residents, it really does have an impact.
Huge.
What the judges are doing, what the prosecutors are doing, what the mayor's doing in Marion County, because we're not, you can't be a suburb of nothing, as the speaker likes to say.
Correct.
And so we're all impacted by that. So we put in a new structure for governance. We put in new accountability measures. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, the Marion County Judicial Selection Committee, which does retention for judges, had a vote and voted to keep one of the judges off the ballot. And so, I mean, it's working. The system that we put in place, and that took a ton of work. That was to really be thoughtful, to do it in a way that wasn't attacking the judiciary. I mean, one of the concerns, I think you and I have talked about this, one of the big concerns I have is we are exacerbating this sort of loss, this erosion of credibility of, and faith in the judiciary. And that's dangerous. That's a dangerous precedent in our country. Yeah. So I'll never take shots at the judiciary. I wanted to do it in a way that was constructive. Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of buy-in and a lot of conversations. I think we got to the right place. And, given that we hadn't touched that structure in about a decade, it was important and significant. So I was really proud of that.
So we look at this session. We as we wrap it up, did you have to then your name's on the ballot and we have to run again? And I thought what was unique, and we've proudly endorsed you. Our OneZone Business Action Committee has proudly endorsed you. And I can tell you, number one, the reason why is you've always been a good person for us to be able to call and give you perspective, or vice versa, and you call us and we can give you perspective. And so, number one, thank you. We continue to be proud of endorsing you. But I think one of the things that as we were doing our PAC interviews, that I always asked the candidates, which I thought was kind of fascinating, was, now you and your family knock on doors, lots of doors. Yeah. Sometimes I always ask this question because sometimes we as businesses, we can't assume things. Right. And you guys are on the grassroots knocking on thousands of doors. What are you hearing? What are you hearing from neighbors and the folks that are around you in your district? What are you hearing as you knock on those doors?
I think there's two things. I think one, from a policy standpoint, I still hear quite a bit about property taxes. And I hear both sides, right? I still hear folks who are concerned where their property taxes have gone and want more reform, or didn't fully understand Senate Bill 1 from the relief side, and so wanted to know what they actually are getting out of this bill and this reform. And it was complex. Yeah. So I spend quite a bit of doors talking about property taxes. On the sort of non-policy side, Jack, a lot of what I hear is, hey, can we just get back to normal? Can we get to a place where we can agree amicably? We can work on issues together. We can be Hoosiers first. We can put the best interests of the state first. It's quite a bit of what I hear about, and I think one of the reasons that I think I've done fairly well is that aligns pretty well with how I view governance and the reason I got into this, and to work collaboratively. And by the way, I think people know this if they're watching the podcast. I think people generally know this, but in the State House, there is a lot of collegiality. There's a lot of sort of common ground that's found. Most of the bills are bipartisan. There's a good working relationship between Republicans and Democrats. It's not quite as, once you shut off social media, you realize that the rest of the world isn't sitting around, sort of obsessed with a lot of these issues. Yeah. So, but I consistently hear it at doors is sort of just, be civil. Can't you guys just get normal and work on some of these issues, in a normal way? Yeah. And that it makes it a little challenging. It's also interesting. It's one of the shifts when you think about what's different now is, that saying that you used to have of all politics is local has sort of gone out the window. It's a lot of national topics. You have a lot of conversations around what's going on at the federal level, or Donald Trump, or the war, or these things. And I certainly have my opinions on those things. Yeah. But one, I can't control any of that stuff. And two, that's not why I got into public service at the state level. So I don't really go down those rabbit holes much. I try to stick to the issues we're working on.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I think, to your point, I think we hear that as well in our legislative surveys. One, I honestly believe that one of the things, what's been kind of fascinating to watch as surveys has really been around that civility and creating opportunities. Because to your point, I think what people read or what the small snippets they see of maybe some of that not working together type of rhetoric. I mean, there's a lot of bills where you guys are working together, even within your own party, working together, but also across the aisle. I can think like with Representative Garcia Wilburn, there are a lot of bills with her as well that I see with the two of you trying to work on, or maybe Representative Schonkweiler and her work on. I just use you two guys as an example, but I mean, there's so many examples of that in a session, but sometimes they don't see the light of day because they're not as much fun to put on the front page of.
That's right. I mean, it really is about generating
100%
conversation and clicks, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. When you knock on doors in Carmore, Westfield, and each of these communities that I represent is a little bit of a different flavor.
Yeah.
But I mean, truthfully, it's generally very traditional people.
Yeah.
It's conservative with a little c families in the way they handle their finances or think about education or raise their children, or their spirituality, their religion, their faith. Tend to be conservative, but they just want stability. Yeah. They want their representatives to work together in concert to advance the interests of the community and the state.
Awesome.
And that's what makes my district so much fun to represent. Also challenging, but so much fun to represent is I've got really intelligent, thoughtful, educated voters, and those types of voters really do want thoughtfulness in the State House.
I love that. Well, as we begin to kind of wrap up our conversation, what are you excited for as we head into the second half of the year? Obviously you're still running a campaign, but what are you excited for as you head into another? Hopefully, we want to continue this.
Yeah,
and so what
it's going to be, like? Jag, it's going to be
it's budget year too.
It's going to be budget. I mean, I have a feeling my time will be consumed by budget issues and then taxation issues. We know the challenges with Senate Bill 1, right? I mean, we've heard all sides of this, and truthfully, I think all sides of it have it right. We tried to find this middle ground where we were providing significant relief, which, by the way, I think we did provide some significant relief. I think it's been misrepresented a little bit, but when you think about when this is fully implemented in 2031, to have 2/3 of your net assessed value deducted from your property taxes is a big step. Yeah. In addition to having the property tax caps, it's a big step and it's a lot of relief. And at the same time, we've had to find, and we have to continue to find, ways that we are not handcuffing cities like Westfield and Carmel and Noblesville and Fishers and others that look like us from being able to make investments in what people want. Because we talked a little earlier about population growth, and
100%.
The amenities are what drive that. You got to be a place where people want. When Lily's recruiting somebody to come for a high six-figure job or whatever, they're not recruiting the individual. They're recruiting the family. They're recruiting the wife or the husband. They're recruiting the kids. And so they want to know schools work. Yep. They want to know there's a great hospital nearby. They want to know, that there's a beautiful library. We have all these things. Yeah. But we have all these things because we've been able to make investments. And so our communities have to have the resources to be able to make those investments. And we certainly can balance that against real tax relief.
100%.
And so going back to the conversation we were having, there are things that we're going to have to clean up. And I have a feeling that going into next session, if I'm lucky enough to stay around, that's where my time will be consumed. Is how do we continue to tweak this legislation going forward, preserve the pieces that are great about it, and then just fix the stuff that need to be fixed.
Well, as a wise speaker once said, "Don't judge us how we start. Don't judge us in the middle.
Absolutely.
Judge us how we end."
That's right. That's very wise. Yeah.
So if Speaker Houston's watching, that's the cool. But Danny, just thank you so much for continuing to raise your hand and serve. Continue to be a strong voice for not only for us, but for your district as well when it comes to policy. We're very lucky to have someone like you down there with the amount of experience you have. And I will say, I think we're very lucky in Hamilton County to have a really great group of legislators that are extremely knowledgeable in the issues, but also have the ability to work with anybody from across the state. And I think that's a powerful thing. I don't think you see that everywhere. Right. I think that's that little thing that I at least see from an outside perspective. You guys are always working from Evansville to South Bend to, east and west, trying to be a voice for not only your district and Hamilton County, but also for other counties that need ways to continue to sometimes the issues that maybe we don't think about are big issues somewhere else in the state.
Yeah, and
It's huge.
just to end on that,
Yeah,
that's a really important point. I think it's important for everybody to understand that it's a big state.
Yeah.
And if you've got 150 people in the legislature, 100 members in the House, there are a lot of different agendas and priorities, and communities look different, and they prioritize different things. And so our responsibility is to go in there, represent the best interests of Hamilton County and of our cities, and our county government, and our obviously our constituents, and do it in a way that also balances that against where we think the state needs to continue to grow. Because the reality is, if you're not growing, you're dying. We talk about that all the time.
Yep.
And so we've got to find ways to continue that incredible momentum that we've experienced for 20 years and build on it, fix the things that need to be fixed, but then just continue to sort of slam on the accelerator and keep this thing going.
Love it. Couldn't say it any better. Yeah. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
I
Jack.
appreciate it. And thank you all for watching.